Hello, everybody. Um, as many of you guys know, that James Gunn is going to kickstart his DC cinematic universe with the release of Superman Legacy, and as you all know, Aquaman: The Lost Kingdom, which has been scheduled to be released on December 22nd of this year, is going to be the final installment of the old regime's DC cinematic universe. I figured I would tell you guys 10 characters, right, that I thought of at the top of my head that I think should exist and be brought to life in James Gunn's DC Cinematic Universe. Now I'm going to go backwards from 10 to number 1, and starting with number 10, I am going to go with the legendary Zarnian bounty hunter, the main man himself, Lobo. Now, of course, considering that Jason Momoa is no longer going to be Aquaman, there's a chance he may be Lobo, but we'll see what happens. Lobo's a very popular he's a very popular, legendary, and iconic character in the DC universe. He's been one of the comics' most beloved anti-heroes, and one of the most physically powerful characters in the DC universe. His strength is right up there with Superman, Etrigan the Demon, and Captain Marvel slash Shazam. His durability is impressive. His regeneration is off the charts. He's immortal, meaning his soul is not wanted by the afterlife, meaning heaven and hell, does not want him. He has a genius level intellect despite his goofy and brutish nature. He has a superhuman sense of tracking and smell, meaning he can track someone across the freaking universe. He's a pretty good fighter in brawl. He's got some weapons like handguns, grenades, and a hook and a winch. He's got pretty impressive levels of speed, agility, and reflexes for a man his size. He also has pretty good levels of stamina. Lobo is one of those characters that, if done right, he can be a very good character. I'm not saying he's been done wrong, but if you look at his interpretations in the DC animated universe, he was done well. If you look at his interpretation in the Tomorrowverse, he was done pretty well, especially in the animated film Superman, Man of Tomorrow. This is a character that means a lot to so many people. And surprisingly enough, even legendary writer Stan Lee, many years ago in an interview, stated that Lobo was his favorite DC Comics character, which I find to be very interesting and intriguing, to be quite honest. But Lobo, I think, could work in James Gunn's DC Cinematic Universe. I mean, this is a guy that is an anti-hero. This is a guy that doesn't play by the rules a lot of the times. He often gets into fights with Superman. Well, mostly Superman among heroes within the hero community. But, this is a guy that, I think deserves a shot at the big screen. Oh, I forgot, he was also portrayed very well on the hit TV show that unfortunately did not last very long in Krypton, which I thought was a very good series. Next up on my list is Detective Chimp. Now, for those who know who Detective Chimp is, he's basically an anthropomorphic primate version of Sherlock Holmes. He is widely regarded as one of the best detective characters in all of comics. He has teamed up with Batman many times over the years, especially in the amazing animated series from 2008, Batman the Brave and the Bold. He's basically a Sherlock Holmes type character, but in the form of a chimpanzee, and I think he's a very cool character. And I think he definitely deserves a shot on the big screen, especially in James Gunn's DC Cinematic Universe. Next up on the list, even though they had a hit TV series, it wasn't really part of the mainstream DC Cinematic Universe. And that is the Doom Patrol. Now, my first exposure to these group of characters was through the 2003 Teen Titans animated series. And I thought, wow, these guys are pretty cool. They're kind of like an X-Men, Fantastic Four kind of vibe where they have a family-like bond, but they're kind of treated like outcasts because they're not really human. That was really cool to me. I know Timothy Dalton and Brendan Fraser was a part of the hit TV series. And even though I haven't watched it, from the clips that I've seen, it looked really good. And I think they should be given a shot at the big screen. The next up on the list is a three-way tie between three new God characters. Orion, Mr. Miracle, and Big Barda. Now, these characters are part of a group of characters called the New Gods, which were created in the early 1970s by the legend himself, Jack Kirby. And basically, the New Gods were basically this group of godlike beings that were at war with one another for a very, very long time. You have two new groups of New God characters. You have the ones that live in Apocalypse, ruled by Darkseid, and you have the ones that live on a playful planet called New Genesis, which are ruled by Darkseid's brother, Highfather. And basically, to end the bloodshed, they basically exchanged sons. Darkseid gave Orion a Highfather. Highfather gave Scott-Free, aka Mr. Miracle, to Darkseid. And basically, while Scott-Free endured a life of hell and torture on Apocalypse, Orion, despite inheriting Darkseid's rage and hatred for everything, he endured a life of peace, love, and happiness. Although he did feel a bit like an outcast because, as I said, he inherited Darkseid's rage and hatred for all living things without the natural control over it. And Big Barda was basically, in a lot of ways, is the New God's equivalent to Wonder Woman. As a matter of fact, I say of all the other female heroes, I say Big Barda is the closest to being Wonder Woman's equal. She's a very strong character. She's a very powerful female character. She's gone toe-to-toe against the DC Comics iteration of Thor and has lived to tell it. I mean, she's a very strong character. She has very good fight skills. You know, she was the original general of Darkseid's female Furies. But little do you guys know that she is the wife of Mr. Miracle. As a matter of fact, Big Barda and Mr. Miracle are one of the most popular and well-loved, well-respected couples in all the comics and fiction. I mean, they have been together for a very long time. As a matter of fact, I think they were childhood sweethearts. They've known each other since they were kids, and they loved each other since they were kids, which I find to be very fascinating. Now, as for Orion, he is probably the strongest of Darkseid's sons, if probably the most powerful, considering the fact that he has not only have raw physical strength comparable to Superman, but also his father Darkseid, and he has the Astro Force, which is basically the counterattack to Darkseid's Omega Force, or Omega Effect, excuse me. Yeah, Orion, in my opinion, is my favorite of the New Gods. I really like him a lot. I would love to see him on the big screen. Next up on my list is another great Jack Kirby character, Etrigan the Demon. Gunn, the form of man, rise the demon, Etrigan. My first exposure to this character was through the DC animated universe, especially in particular their Justice League animated series. This character is awesome for a wide variety of reasons. One, he speaks in rhyme. Two, he's very powerful physically and in magic. He's given Superman a run for his money and for good reason, not just in terms of raw strength, but also given his magical abilities as well. And despite, being a demon, he often and rightfully so fights on the side of the heroes. He's one of the founding members of the Justice League Dark Team. He's a very good character. I mean, I'll never forget his rivalry with Morgan Le Fay from the Justice League cartoon, which was great in my opinion. He is, in my opinion, a fantastic character. I mean, he was basically given a human host named Jason Blood by Etrigan's half-brother, Merlin the Magician, who I'm sure many of you guys know from the King Arthur stuff. He's a really good character, Etrigan the Demon. Hopefully, if DC gets him right, not just in terms of his character, but in terms of the CGI, visual special effects, and maybe even the makeup, he could be a really good and memorable character on the big screen. Next up is Swamp Thing. Now, Swamp Thing is a very interesting character. Obviously, he was created by Len Wein, but his most popular run was when Alan Moore, who now hates the comic book industry, revitalized and retconned the character's backstory. Swamp Thing is, without question, one of the most powerful beings, especially when it comes to the elemental beings in the DC universe. I mean, this guy is empowered by plant and vegetation life. He has strength that's off the charts. I mean, he's gone toe-to-toe against Superman, Solomon Grundy, and many other powers. I mean, Swamp Thing is a very powerful character. His biggest weakness, which is no surprise to anybody, it's not really stupid, is pollution. I mean, if you pollution causes harm to him, which makes sense because pollution has harmed the planet for since the beginning of time, and you know, pollution is not good for the environment. And his human holes, or should I say, his real name is Alec Holland, who was a scientist, a pretty remarkable and good scientist. He was a good family man. And also, this accident kind of turned him, especially his consciousness, into a humanoid plant monster called Swamp Thing. So, I think if he's done right, if they give him. I heard the Swamp Things TV series was released that came out, I think, a few years ago, was really, really good. I think he could be done right. I think he's a very good character, but we'll see. You know? Next up on my list is Zatanna. Zatanna. My first exposure to her was to the DC animated universe. And she's definitely one of the best and one of the most well-written, well-developed female characters in comics and fiction. I mean, she was one of Batman's many love interests. She's still, to this day, one of Batman's greatest allies and friends. She's been one of the most valuable and valued members of the Justice League. And I believe she is still one of John Constantine's love interests as well. And, I mean, she's one of the most powerful sorcerers, magicians, magic users in the DC universe. I mean, she's given a lot of power, a lot of beings a run for their money. And she's a very good hand-to-hand combatant. I think she's a really damn good character. Next up, which I know a movie's going to be in development, but hopefully, they actually go with it and do him right, and that is Plastic Man. Plastic Man has been around since the golden age of comic books, most likely between the 1940s and 1950s. My first exposure to Plastic Man, believe it or not, was to a classic episode of the original Super Friends cartoons from the 70s and 80s, but he only came in there to help get a rat out of behind one of the Super Friends computers. I really didn't hold jack shit, excuse my French, about Plastic Man until I watched the excellent animated series from 2008, Batman and Brave and the Bold, in which he was voiced by legendary SpongeBob SquarePants voice actor Tom Kenny. And, we got, their version of Plastic Man's origin. Basically, Plastic Man was a criminal, a small-time criminal, that got shot while committing a heist. Chemicals pour into his wound, and all of a sudden he could stretch, he could become elastic and malleable. Similar to Mr. Fantastic, but in a much more powerful and way. What I mean is, Plastic Man, believe it or not, is actually one of the more powerful members of the Justice League. I mean, he's given Martian Manhunter, in a lot of ways, a run for his money, which I'll talk about later on in this video. As a matter of fact, I'll talk about it right now. Plastic Man is very strong. He can use his elasticity and malleability to increase his size, to increase his strength and durability. And he's somewhat immortal, meaning he doesn't really age that much. If not, he ages very slowly. He can shapeshift to a wide variety of vehicles and people. He can do all kinds of stuff. He's basically Mr. Fantastic on steroids. Next up on the list, number 2 on my list. Now, some of you guys may be familiar with this character, but most of you guys, I promise you, are not. And that is Nathaniel Adam, aka Captain Atom. Captain Atom, for those who do not know, is one of the top 5, maybe even top 3, most powerful superheroes in the entire DC universe. As I said before, his real name is Nathaniel Adam, and he's one of the most powerful beings the DC universe has ever had. I mean, the guy can manipulate, project the quantum field, which enables him to alter time, alter reality, create realities in his image. He can also absorb massive amounts of energy. He has like an anti-magic ability where magic doesn't seem to work on him. He's got near invulnerability. He has a pretty impressive healing factor. He can fly, run at supersonic speeds, and he's got Superman levels of strength. I mean, this guy has gone toe to toe against Superman and even Superboy Prime at one point, which is pretty darn impressive. Even Mr. Majestic from the Wildstorm / Image Comics franchise. So that's pretty damn good. Now, his real name, as I mentioned before, is Nathaniel Adam, and when we first see him in his series, we were given the impression that this was a guy that did a crime that he had no business committing. So in exchange for his freedom, he had to agree to a sketchy experiment which may cost him his life. He had to basically test this dilasteel alien metal, which somehow killed him, but actually sent him back in time. And then once he came back to the present, he was all coated with the dilasteel metal. He could fly, shoot energy blasts, all that kind of stuff. And then we get to realize that he was framed, that he's actually a good man. He was a good family man. He was a good soldier. It's just that his corrupt general, Wade Eiling, framed him for a crime. He framed him for the crime. And so, yeah, that's pretty interesting. Now, before I get into my number one, here are a couple honorable mentions that I'm going to suggest. Here are a couple honorable mentions. One is Solomon Grundy. I think it's about damn time we get this guy on the big screen. He's one of my top 3 favorite villains in the DC Comics universe. He is my favorite zombie character of all time. He has a very cool, unique, and interesting backstory and origin. Hopefully, if they do him similarly to how he was done on the Stargirl series, where he was a really good CGI monster, I think he could be a fan favorite among moviegoers. Next up, I think a lot of us have been waiting for this character to appear in countless Superman movies, and that is Brainiac. Brainiac is my favorite DC Comics villain of all time. He's one of those characters that is not only an intellectual threat, but a physical threat as well. And he can mess with technology. He's the smartest being in the DC universe, considering the fact that he has a 12th level intellect. He is a very serious threat. He's not only been a Superman villain, he's been a DC Universe villain. Especially if you ever played DC Universe Online, he was a big time threat, a big time villain in that game. And for a wide variety of good reasons. Now, for the number one DC character I want to see on the big screen, and that is Mr. John Jones, aka the shape-shifting Martian Manhunter. For those who don't know, he made his very first appearance in Detective Comics Volume 1, issue number 225 in 1955. That's right, he made his very first appearance in a Batman comic. And in 1960, he became a founding member of the original Justice League of America, along with Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, Barry Allen Flash, Al Jordan Green Lantern, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, Barry Allen Flash, Al Jordan Green Lantern. Yeah, that's 6. I'm sorry. And, he has been one of my favorite characters since I got exposed to him in the DC animated universe, especially in particular the Justice League animated series, in which he was voiced by Carl Lumbly. Martian Manhunter, even though I don't really praise characters for their power set, in my opinion, he has one of the most interesting set of powers in the DC in all of comics and fiction. I mean, this is a guy that has gone toe-to-toe against Superman, Wonder Woman, Supergirl, Darkseid, Doomsday, Superboy Prime, Captain Marvel / Shazam. As a matter of fact, in an all-out brawl fight, if you will, he knocked out Captain Marvel. I'm not even exaggerating. He did that in the early issues of the Justice League International series, which I thought was really damn good. He has telepathy, telekinesis, regeneration, superhuman senses, Martian vision, which is basically his equivalent of Superman's heat vision, Martian breath, intangibility, invisibility, flight, near invulnerability, Super speed, though not quite as fast as Superman and the Flash. Agility and reflexes. He can even, he can also shapeshift to a wide variety of people and creatures to his heart content. Uh, he's also has a genius level intellect. He's an expert detective. To sum this up, Martian Manhunter is a very powerful and versatile character. And I know to a lot of you guys are like, whoa, he's got all these powers, yet he does have a couple of weaknesses. He's vulnerable. He loves chocos, which are basically Oreo-like cookies, and he has a psychosomatic weakness to fire, which causes him to lose control of his biomorphic form. As Batman once said in the comics in one of his files, Martian Manhunter is an amalgam of Superman and the Dark Knight himself. If that doesn't impress you, I don't know what the hell will. I always liked Martian Manhunter because of his character. I mean, even though he seems very stoic from time to time, he's actually a very kind-hearted, compassionate person. He's even seen as by many, if not all, as the hard soul of the Justice League because this guy went through so much tragedy in his life. I mean, this guy witnessed the entire eradication, minus his evil twin brother Malefach, of his family and people by Ron Mear's curse. I mean, pretty much they were all burnt to death. They were all engulfed in flames. And, it made him disarmed. Plus, when he arrived on Earth, his sudden presence gave the scientist that accidentally teleported to Earth a heart attack and died. So there's that. And, Martian Manhunter, is a very cool and interesting character. Um, if you haven't heard of him, I highly recommend you look him up. He's a really cool character. He's been one of my favorites for years. Um, so yeah, peace out.